In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is Thursday, October 27th, and welcome into the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcasts. I'd like to start off by welcoming in Steve Marcus. What's going on, Steve?
Oh, not much at all. Just here, enjoying some football, enjoying a lashing that is being handed out by the Titans on some Thursday Night Football.
At least there's points being scored, right?
There are points being scored, many of them against the Jaguars and my fantasy football team. So, that's all right. But it's good stuff. Always good when football's on.
I like to welcome you in first because I feel like at this point in the season, you really, really need it.
I appreciate that. I really do. And, I don't need the pity, though. I'll be all right. I'm a big boy.
Well, all right, then. I'd like to also welcome in Sal Lito. What's up, Sal?
Hello, fellers.
How are you, Sal?
Oh, I'd be better if I went with my gut tonight.
Yeah, you would be. That's my bad.
Oh, stop it! I if I wanted to do it, I would have done it. So what I'm talking about is about 7:45 Eastern time tonight. I sent in the group chat that we share that I'm thinking of starting Derrick Henry over Jordan Howard this week. Now, Kevin did say he thinks I would regret it, but I said, nah, it's probably not likely. And sure enough, he has a 15-point first half, and Jordan Howard will probably have 15 yards in the game this weekend.
Yeah, playing against the Vikings is never an easy task, and now that you've already gotten that many points out, or would have gotten that many out of Henry, I have to say you probably would not regret that at all if you had done it.
Oh, well, you have perfect vision, hindsight-wise.
I do. It's really incredible. You know, I'm very good that way.
Nice. I would say that if you guys could ever get a listen to the outtakes or the pre-show that we do, tonight was quite funny. And Steve is not living a good life right now. So everyone send him well wishes, send him something, send him sympathy cards. The boy is not in good shape.
I would also Steve, is there any way that you can publish the league video for the listeners? Because I feel like this week
it's on YouTube.
This week
I could actually include it at the end of this podcast.
That would be great.
I could do that.
I feel like the listeners really would get a good sense of what you're going through by watching this week's league video, or at least hearing it.
My understanding, Steve, is that every one of those videos are for public consumption on YouTube, correct?
That is correct. That is also correct.
Do you know how people can find them?
That I don't know. I don't even know how to search for myself on there.
All right. Well, we will work on that. We will try to find a way to send out the link. Maybe we'll tweet it out if we get the chance to do that, because obviously you can follow us on Twitter. Follow the show at Falafel House. You can follow me as at Wally Central. You can follow Steve as at Sidsky, and you can follow Sal as at Lito Sal. So maybe we'll see if we can find a way to get that out on Twitter, because those videos are pretty good to begin with, and this week was classic. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. We got a lot going on tonight. Obviously, we have to get through some previews. The big weekend coming up in the NFL, although actually, I guess it is one of the smallest weekends in the NFL because of all the bye weeks. Hopefully, you guys are ready to get through the next 2 weeks with your teams. Lots of bye weeks, lots of lineup issues. So hopefully, we can guide you through some of that, because it's what we do. We try to get you your best lineup on the field. So, Steve, is your best lineup on the field already tonight, or no?
I'm kind of dealing with the only lineup that I could possibly field is in there for me. So,
right.
I talk about a lot about falafel, and I'm doing really bad there. But overall, like I said, I'm not doing too bad. It's just it's important to me to do well in falafel, and it's not going well. So I'm focusing on that one the most, and it's really, really dragging me down. So overall, though, I feel like I've got the best lineup going every single week.
Good. Well, that's good. We'll hope that you pull it out this week against the current number one team. So that would help everyone out, I think. So let's get into some games. You guys ready for that?
Let's do it.
All right, Sal, give me your best London accent.
My best London accent.
Yeah. We got one more London game. I want to hear one last Sal London impression. So why don't you announce the game? It's a 9:30 a.m. game here in the States, but who's playing who in London on Sunday morning?
Right. So kicking off at 9:30 a.m. on the East Coast, we have the Washington Redskins facing the Cincinnati Bengals.
You know, that was better than you've done in the past. So
that wasn't too bad.
Would you like me to do a bloody drunken Englishman?
All right, I think this is where it's starting to go south. So let's talk about the game a little bit. It sounds like on the injury news front, it looks like most of your players are going to play in this one, including Josh Norman for Washington. Obviously the defensive side, but that typically makes a huge difference when you're talking about AJ Green going up against one of the top cornerbacks in the league. What do you guys think about that as far as AJ Green? I mean, I'm looking at our rankings right now for the week. We have him at, number 3 overall in our consensus rankings. I have him at 2. You guys have him both at 3. So are you worried about him facing off against Norman at all? Apparently we're not.
Yeah,
I definitely.
AJ Green is going to be cut off by Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
No, AJ Green is one of those guys that his talent level is that which you don't sit him. You don't worry about who he's going matched up or who he's going up against. You saw the type of play that he can make with the Hail Mary that Andy Dalton threw at going into halftime, and the basically one-handed catch he made going up over a pile. And so it does not matter who he's going up against. And Josh Norman has not been the same cornerback this year. You've seen plays where he's been taken deep and wide receivers have gotten the best of him. So I'm not worried about him being able to shut down AJ Green. I'm starting him, and I'm not worried about it at all.
Yeah, and there's not much to add to that. He's a freakish athlete. He's got great body control, and that was one of the most impressive catches I've seen for a touchdown. So I don't think there's much to add to that. You get AJ Green in your lineup every week, or you lose.
A minimum of 8 targets in every single game this year is pretty impressive. And that will always continue. Obviously, 8 is the minimum that he gets. He's had multiple games over in double-digit targets. So, yeah, he's a guy you're going to get in your lineups, no question about that. So, let's talk about someone else here in this game, Matt Jones. Steve, I know you've made some moves with some Washington running backs. So, what are you doing with Matt Jones this week?
Oh, well, he didn't practice on Wednesday, and they said that if he were to miss some time, that Rob Kelly would be the guy that would take over for him. So I would definitely have to be cautious about it. The matchup isn't terrible against Cincinnati's run defense, but with the way that Matt Jones has been running the last couple of weeks with his fumbling issues that he's been having, I would be kind of worried to start him. I personally, with his knee issue, I don't think that he's going to be starting. So I think that Rob Kelly will actually be the one that gets to start this week. And that would kind of scare me. I don't think that I would have him really in a startable position. So if that were the case, I'm probably avoiding the Washington backfield this week altogether.
I would get Chris Thompson in. I'd have no problem starting Chris Thompson in a slightly deeper league. He got the most carries last week. He's getting plenty of targets every week. He's looked really good. I think he's flying under the radar right now. So if you need a running back and there's somebody out and he's sitting out there on the waivers, I'd pick him up and put him in.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a good point about Thompson. I think we have him ranked 31 overall in our consensus rankings, whereas we have Rob Kelly down at 40. I don't think any of us ranked Matt Jones because the injury concerns there. So that sounds about right as far as those guys. I like Chris Thompson. He's getting used in the passing game a lot, and obviously if he gets the carries and gets the production he did last week, then he should be good to go for this next matchup. I think Cincinnati is 13th. No, 13th in running back points scored against. So they're not bad against the run, but I think Chris Thompson's still not a bad play.
Yeah, not at all. Not as good as I think that Jeremy Hill's play would be this week. You saw what he did last week against Cleveland, which I know is terrible defense, but Washington's run defense isn't much better. They're one of only 3 teams allowing more than 5 yards per carry. They've allowed 9 rushing touchdowns this year. So I think that Jeremy Hill has started to really look a lot better the last couple of weeks, and if he is able to stay healthy, and if the Bengals were to get a lead in this game, I think that he would have a very productive afternoon as well.
Yeah, let's face it, in the bye week where you have 6 teams off, you probably have to use Hill. I know in there's a few leagues I'm in the large leagues where I always have to use him, but in one of my smaller leagues this week, he's absolutely getting in for me with the McCoy injury and a few other guys on bye. So Jeremy Hill, I mean, nothing ever came out about the injury after that game. There's really literally been no news, and they're playing Sunday morning early, so I'm going to presume he's good to go.
Yeah,
I believe he was off the injury report.
Very surprising there. Very surprising there. He looked awfully hurt when he came off the field, so definitely something to keep an eye on there. But I mean, again, with him coming off or not being on the injury report, you gotta assume he's going to be okay. What about Jordan Reed? What are we doing with Jordan Reed? It looks like he's cleared to travel to London. Doesn't necessarily mean he's been cleared to play, but I mean, I know for me, if he's playing, I'm putting him in there because this is a pretty solid matchup.
Wherever I own him, I've already put him in my lineup, so wishful thinking.
Yep, I agree. If he's playing, I'm playing him.
Yep. We have him number 1 overall, only because I have him at number 1 overall, and you guys both have him at 2. So should be a good game for him. All right, let's move along here. Detroit Lions are going to play the Houston Texans in Houston. And look, a lot of injuries on the Lions side as far as the running backs, but it seems like they all might be healthy this week. It looks like Riddick's going to play. It looks like Washington's going to play. What are you guys doing with either of those guys? Sal, we'll start with you. Are you immediately inserting these guys back into your lineup? A lot of bye weeks to fill in, so are these valuable options?
Washington's not a guy I'm interested in getting in my lineup this week, but Theo Riddick, who I own in at least 3 places, and I've been hurting not having him, he's getting right back into my lineup. He was removed from the injury report, so that tells me he's fully healthy and he's good to go. And he's definitely an aspect that they've missed in this offense over the last 2 weeks. So I'm happy to have him back. And if you have him and you don't have clear-cut excellent starts ahead of him, get him in your lineup.
Yeah, the Texans giving up almost 20, a little over 20 points per game, fantasy points per game to running backs. And I'm looking it up right now as far as the yardage is concerned. Just to see where they're at with that, because I think they're giving up an awful lot of yards, but I could be wrong. So, Steve, what are your thoughts while I'm looking this up?
Yeah, I agree with Sal. I think that the running backs are Theo Riddick, especially, is who you're going to want to have in there. I don't think that Dwayne Washington is someone you're going to need to rely on unless you're, really, really desperate. He should get you some work, especially the goal line work. But we haven't really seen what he can do yet. He got injured his first game in there after he was announced as, going to be getting some touches. So I don't think that he's going to be needed. I do like Theo Riddick, much like Sal. But I'm looking more at someone like DeAndre Hopkins in this game, someone who has been struggling the last few weeks, somewhat due to his schedule, but also a lot going on with Brock Osweiler looking pretty terrible. They're going against Detroit, who's 23rd against passing. They've allowed QBs to complete 74% of their passes against them and have allowed a league-high 18 passing touchdowns. So if Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins don't have a good game in this one, I don't know exactly what you're going to be able to do with them because their value right now is not anywhere where it should be. And if they have another bad game here, you have to start to wonder when are they going to be able to have those good games? Is it going to come back at all this year?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guy who it all lives and dies with is Brock Osweiler, right? So I'll tell you how bad it is in the 16-team league. So you guys who are out there who are playing 10s and 12s and haven't ventured into the bigger leagues yet, I have no alternative this week but to choose from McCown and Osweiler because Eli Manning is on bye week. But Osweiler, they both have great matchups, incidentally, So, who would you guys choose out of those two guys to start this week, if you had that choice, that pitiful choice?
Osweiler.
I actually go with McCown. If I know McCown,
Nice.
if I know McCown's playing, I'm going with McCown.
Appreciate you guys helping me by splitting it. I also have Kessler on my bench just in case McCown is not a go. So we'll see. Osweiler, believe it or not, is on waivers. He has to clear in the morning, and I'll have that pitiful choice to make come this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, here's the deal with that. I think you have the Lions, who are not a terrible defense. Obviously, they've had some injuries in the secondary, but they're giving up what? Let's see here. They are giving up 27.5 points per game to quarterbacks. So I guess that's
they're miserable.
Just brutal there. But the Jets haven't been great either. Just to throw that out there. So, and I think McCown's more talented than Osweiler, sadly.
Oof, that's saying a mouthful.
Yeah. I really do. It's really sad. So hopefully that helps you out there, Sal. All right, so we'll move along. Not a lot else to talk about in that game. So let's keep moving. The Arizona Cardinals will travel to Carolina in a rematch of the NFC Championship game from last year. Obviously, Arizona is going to be looking for a little bit of revenge here after getting trounced last year. The Panthers have not looked good of late. Obviously, terrible record, and just haven't been able to stop anyone through the air whatsoever. And the Cardinals come in banged up on offense with their receiving core, basically not in shambles. I don't want to say in shambles, but there's a lot of injuries and question marks going on right now. And then on top of that, Carson Palmer hasn't looked good. So, Steve, what are you doing with the Cardinals offense right now? Obviously, David Johnson is what he is. You're starting him every week. There's no question about that. And, number one running back, number one player in fantasy right now. But what are you doing as far as their receivers and Carson Palmer?
Carson Palmer, I've actually dropped him in a lot of places this week, which is kind of crazy considering how good he was last year. And, he did have a decent week last week. Yeah, I believe he ended up scoring somewhere around 17 points. But you're right. He just has not looked good, and he has not looked comfortable. He's still on the injury report dealing with that hamstring, even though he's just limited and he's not in any danger of missing the game. It's still something that's being talked about. So I'm starting Larry Fitzgerald because Larry Fitzgerald is he's the safety blanket on that for that offense. And then it looks like John Brown's going to be coming back this week, but I don't know if you could trust any of these other wide receivers. It seems like it's pick them one guy this week, one guy this week, one guy this week. Larry Fitzgerald seems to be the only guy that you can rely on. And then David Johnson, of course, even though it will probably be a tougher game running for him. He is used so much in the passing game that it's not going to matter. His production's so good, and it's always going to be there. So that is, there's only a couple guys on that offense this year that I'm starting every week.
So the Panthers give up 25.3 points per game to quarterbacks, and they, aren't doing much better against wide receivers, giving up 25.7 fantasy points per game to receivers. Those are both 11th for the receivers and third in worst in the league for quarterbacks. So I get your hesitation on Carson Palmer. Sal and I both have him ranked inside the top 10 this week. I think if he's healthy, I think he's on your roster. He's not a bad play this week.
My only concern, and I do have him ranked that high, and I am starting him in one league. My only concern is, did Carolina take the week off, maybe get some things right, and they come out really pumped up this week? What we saw last week between Seattle and Arizona was just absolutely pitiful. And, do they get kept in check like that again? It's very tricky because this Carolina team has got to turn it around at some point. This is a Super Bowl, Super Bowl loser last year. Do they, though? Yeah, I think they do. It's a good team.
At this point in the season, I don't know that they do.
Well, luckily for them, the Atlanta Falcons will just probably shoot themselves in the foot and keep it very obtainable to come back in. And obviously New Orleans is not going anywhere, and Tampa Bay doesn't scare me long term either. So I think Carolina's still at play for that division. As crazy as it seems with that record, but it worries me coming out of the bye that they might have fixed a few things, and with the injuries and the lack of play from the depth of that wide receiving core in Arizona, that it could be a trap game.
Trap game.
All right.
Dun, dun, dun.
So it could be a trap game, I suppose. So what are you doing with the Carolina Panthers offense then? I mean, I think you're starting your normal starts there. I think obviously Cam Newton, you're going to start. You're going to start Jonathan Stewart. Greg Olsen is a must start. But what about Kelvin Benjamin? What's going on with Kelvin Benjamin, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, listen. So the guy he came back off the injury and he had that great first week, and right away everybody was anointing him to be, back to being a complete full stud. But Cam Newton has struggled. The offense has struggled. So I don't know that it's just Kelvin Benjamin as much as it's the whole package over there in Carolina. It hasn't seemed to hurt Greg Olsen, but other than that, it seems to have hurt everybody. I'm not really high on Jonathan Stewart this week. I don't even know where I have him ranked. I'm sure I have him as an RB2, but I'm not loving his matchup. Arizona's been very good against the run.
You have him at 20 RB20.
Yeah, so he's a low end RB2 for me. So it's not, it's not a great matchup. So I think if you're asking me, I'm confidently starting Cam Newton and Greg Olsen this week. Everybody else I'm suspect on.
I think you're starting Jonathan Stewart, particularly if you have him ranked 20th. I mean, you're putting him in your lineup. It's not a non-start. There's not too many teams out there with running, 3 top 20 or two top 20 running backs that they're going to start.
Yeah, and it's a big week for buys. So you're right. He's most likely getting in, but I'm saying I don't think he's a 100-yard and a touchdown guy this week. But we'll see.
No, I mean, definitely a tough matchup against Arizona. So I hear you on that one. Steve, any thoughts on the Carolina offense other than what we've discussed?
Nope. I think they have those 4 guys every single week that you're pretty much starting. They've not going to be anything lower than wide receiver 2 or running back 2 and tight end 1, quarterback 1. So I think they're just every week you start them and expect more or less depending on the matchup.
All right. So we will move along then. The Arizona the Kansas City Chiefs are taking on the Indianapolis Colts.
Groundhog Day
in Indianapolis. The Colts are 3-4. The Chiefs are creeping up on the Raiders at 4-2, who are second in their division. Sal, second in their division now. I really thought they were going to help me out, but they're starting to fall.
They're 5-2 for Christ's sake.
I know.
Who's in first though?
Just wait. Yeah, obviously the Denver Broncos.
The injuries are coming.
They've already started. Don't remind me.
Yeah. So Andrew Luck has, it was tough in the beginning. It's still kind of tough to watch sometimes, but he's had some good games and he's actually scoring pretty well. Lately. So I think he's our number 3 quarterback overall. Sal and I both have him at 3. Steve, you have him at 4. Why are you so down on Andrew Luck?
Well, nothing personal against Andrew Luck. There are just some other guys that's got some better matchups that I'm a little more in favor of. That's all.
Specifically Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Matt Ryan. I can't believe you picked those guys over Andrew Luck.
I know. It's what can I say? The guy sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Luck is the number 2 overall quarterback so far in fantasy, but over the last 4 weeks, he is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. So to your point, Kev, the slow start, the worry about the maybe still being banged up and that shoulder injury seems to be fixed, and he's getting weapons back. He's getting Moncrief back. Dorsett is healthy and off this. So if he's got the full complement of wide receivers, he could really, really turn it up and really be the leader in the clubhouse for the rest of the season at the quarterback position.
So that's something.
Are you sad? Sorry, Kev. Are you sad that you jumped ship on your prediction on him so early, Sal?
I never jumped ship on the prediction, though.
I don't know about that.
You did, yeah.
I think you did. I think you said there is no
ship?
way that he is going to end the season as the number one fantasy scorer or
would
the number one quarterback.
I would like to hear the tape of that.
We will check the tape and get back to you. So one of the questions that I have for you guys, though, is we saw Philip Dorsett, who obviously is coming back off an injury, but, you know, being in that number 2 role for him was a complete and total fizzle. You know, obviously.
Oh, Jesus.
That's right. That's right.
Obviously, just didn't put up the points that you wanted out of him when we were hoping he would slide right into that Moncrief role. With Moncrief coming back, you know, I think you have to temper expectations with Moncrief coming back from the injury. Maybe he takes a game or two to really pick up speed, but is Dorsett going to be more usable in that third wide receiver role? Do you think that he might be more effective there? And is he a guy that might be a fringe flex play in these heavy bye weeks?
I'll have to see it first before I take a chance, because even when he was playing with the first 2 weeks with Moncrief, it was a big play to get the yardage and not a lot of targets, not a lot of reception. So I think
that's what that role is, right? It's big play.
Yeah, but you can't really. So wouldn't you rather a more consistent flex play, a guy who maybe not get the big yardage, but is going to be a consistent target getter and get you 5-6 catches a week? So in a PPR scenario, he carries the weight with those points. I mean, depends on how deep the league is. And I was a guy, I believe I had Dorsett in one league, and I had to play him with a couple injuries in my flex. So I have used him in a flex, but I'll have to wait a week or two and see how the whole offense together flows with everyone back.
See, I think that's my point, though. You don't have a week or two with these 2 weeks coming up being the heavy bye weeks. That's kind of where I was concerned, you know, where I think he might be more valuable. We have him at 39 overall, but you guys are much further down than I am. I actually have him at wide receiver 26 this week. So I'm just curious about a couple of guys that you have ranked over him, Sal, and maybe we can talk these through. Philip Dorsett or, let's say, Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, Jamison Crowder is the number 21 ranked fantasy wide receiver in both standard and PPR. To me, he's an absolutely much more consistent point getter. He's not going to get you probably the big play. I mean, he had a nice big kick return touchdown, so he does have big playability, but I think he's a much more consistent player. Deshaun Jackson has not been what everybody had hoped. He's been more bust than boom. And Pierre Garcon has kind of taken a little bit of a backseat. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with Crowder all day over Dorsett.
All right, and what about Allen Hurns, who we've seen do a whole lot tonight?
Yeah, I thought that maybe this would be a shot on a Thursday night game where maybe Hurns gets back into the flow a little bit, but Blake Bortles is just a big piece of trash. And going forward, you know, Allen Robinson is probably about to drop out of, you know, Allen Robinson is slipping to a low-end wide receiver 2 flex at this point, and Allen Hurns is starting to become an afterthought.
Useless. I mean, you can say it. He's useless.
He's useless.
Nice. All right, Steve. Any thoughts on Dorsett or anything?
No, I think that once Moncrief gets back and settles into that role, he is the guy that Luck looks to. We've seen it every time that Moncrief has been in there, the connection that they seem to have. And Dorsett, I think, will become really a boomer bust player. I think they'll have those games where he catches the, you know, couple deep balls and gets into the end zone. But on a weekly basis he's not the type of high floor guy or higher floor guy that I can see putting in my lineup week to week.
So tell me about the Kansas City offense and any guys that you're on for this week. I think you're starting Spencer Ware if you have him, but typically the Colts provide no real concern for any offensive weapons. So a guy like Jeremy Maclin, who has been not great this season, is he someone that you expect to have a little uptick in value this week?
I don't know what's wrong with Jeremy Maclin, and he's a guy that he hasn't had more than 5 catches in 2 of his or I'm sorry, he's only had more than 5 catches in 2 of his 6 games so far. And he's only had more than 50 yards in a few of his games. And he's only caught the 1 touchdown that he did all the way back in week 1. Indianapolis is actually their 6th against wide receivers. So they do somewhat decent against them. And, Vontae Davis will probably be on Maclin for the majority of the time. And because their the Colts run defense is so terrible, and how well that Kansas City runs the ball with Spencer Ware, I think that they're going to get up, and I think they're going to be able to run the ball quite a bit. I don't know if I've got him ranked 24th myself. Overall, we've got him ranked 17th. You guys got him as a high-end wide receiver 2. I've got him as a low-end wide receiver 2, and I don't even feel great about that. So I don't know what's wrong with Jeremy Maclin, and I don't know when you're going to be able to trust him again.
Steve, can you tell Falafel America where you have Spencer Ware ranked this week?
I've got Spencer Ware ranked as the number 1 running back.
Wow. Oh,
big fan of Spencer Ware this week.
Oh, man. Number 1, huh?
Number 1.
To be clear, he's 2 overall in our consensus ranking. Sal has him the lowest at 4, and I have him at 3. So, I mean, I think that's a product.
A whole lot of people jumping on my tails right now.
I think it's a product of how bad the Colts are against the run. You're 24.8 fantasy points per game standard scoring for the Colts against running backs. When you look at what they've given up, 763 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns overall. If you add the 4 in through the air, receiving by running backs, it's just it's brutal. They're not a good defense against the run. They're just not a good defense. But
and Jamal Charles, again, a report out today, he's 50-50 at best to go this weekend. And Jamal Charles is off the radar currently, so it really is the way is paved for Spencer Ware this weekend. He should be a legitimate top 5 running back.
Yep. Agree with that. The only other guy to really consider in this one, I think Travis Kelce should be a pretty good play this week as well. We have him at 3 overall. You guys have him at 4. I have him at 2. So definitely a good play. Make sure you're getting him in the lineup. I know he's been up and down, but should have a solid week. So let's continue on. The New England Patriots will take on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. A lot of people were at one time thinking this could be a game which would have a big importance in the division. I do not see it now that Buffalo's 4-3, the Pats are 6-1. So, as we know, the Patriots have done in the past. This could be a little bit of a revenge game. Obviously, the Bills giving the Patriots that 1 loss against Jacoby Brissett. So, look, I think that games like this are the ones that the Patriots really put the pedal on the gas pedal on the floor and really stomp on your throat. So I expect a lot of points out of them from this game. I really do. But I could be wrong. Sal, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I think that the Patriots are going to come out and absolutely stomp a hole in them. I think it's going to be ugly. I think Belichick will, he loves revenge games, and they dealt him that loss a couple of weeks back, and I don't see him letting up. So, I can't say start your deeper Patriot players, but Tom Brady's obviously a must start. Edelman, as long as all is good, come the end of this week with his injuries that he's dealt with. Gronkowski, you get him in. I would start both running backs. I won't vouch for Martellus Bennett after last week's game and him also dealing with a little bit of an injury, or Chris Hogan, anybody deeper than that. But the other 4 or 5 guys, the guys that you would have really carried this offense, they're gonna be points aplenty coming from them this week.
Yeah, I would say you definitely get Hogan in the mix too. I'm not typically very high on Hogan because he's so boom or bust. But in this one, against his former team, that's exactly the kind of matchup they're going to want to exploit. So I could see him going off for a couple of touchdowns and or at least a couple of long plays just to sort of stick it to Rex Ryan even more. Steve, what about the Bills? Are you obviously LaShawn McCoy is not practicing again this week, but he's still going to end up being a game time decision. I think the collective fantasy world wants to see him not start this week, sit and get healthy, and not make it murky, so that you at least know who's starting. But outside of that situation, what are you doing with the Bills?
Well, if McCoy is starting or sitting, I'm not starting him. I'm not putting him on my lineup regardless. If Gillislee is going, I'm putting Gillislee in there, and I'll roll the dice with that. I'm not going to take the chance with Reggie Bush and not doing anything with that. Tyrod Taylor, that's going to be a desperation start, only if you have to, because I agree with you guys. I think this game's going to get out of control. And I don't trust any of the other wide receivers. I think it looks like Robert Woods might be on track to play again this week. And then Marquise Goodwin, I saw popped up on the injury report. He's dealing with some stuff. So I'm staying away from all of the passing game for Buffalo. I don't like it. You can't tell which guy's going to have a good game each week, if any of them. So I'm starting Gillislee from this game on the Bills side, and that's probably about it.
But Gillislee's banged up as well. I don't know if you've seen that.
I did see that, but I think that he's going to be playing as well.
I wouldn't touch a Buffalo Bill this week, period. None of them.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Wow, not a single one. I'm confused because you guys do have, LaShawn McCoy ranked pretty high. So I guess I wonder, you would take them out of the lineup completely, though.
So I ranked McCoy before. It was clear cut that he was out, right?
No, sure.
Gillislee's not McCoy. He's not. So
no, I'm not suggesting you should put McCoy or Gillislee up where McCoy is. I guess my point is, if McCoy plays, you had him ranked at, assuming he played at number 5 overall. But
number 5, right?
But you wouldn't play him, so I'm not.
I'm saying I wouldn't play who?
McCoy.
I'm not saying I wouldn't play McCoy. I'm saying McCoy's not playing, so I'm not starting a Bill this week.
Gotcha. Steve, you said you wouldn't play McCoy.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be a little bit more on track to play, and it's not looking good. And so last week when he did the same thing, and he was saying Sunday morning it came out that he was active, I was saying the same thing. I'm not starting him. I'm not taking that kind of chance. Okay. So I was hoping for some more clarity, and it has just not turned out that way heading into this next week.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So if I misunderstood, I'm operating Kevin that he's out.
Okay.
If McCoy plays, I'd have to really. He's not going to play. Let's just.
Listen,
he's not playing.
Just to be clear, for those of you who may check out our rankings on falafelhouse.com, I just wanted to make sure we clear that up for you. That we do these rankings fairly early in the week, so we don't have all the information when we do. We typically don't get a chance to go back and update them. We're going to call it a system error that we can't do that just for the hell of it. But
there we go.
But just to be clear, that's why I like to ask those questions in case somebody checks these rankings so that they understand our position on it as they're listening to the podcast. All right, so let's continue on. The New York Jets are playing in Cleveland against the Browns. The Browns are obviously not very good at football. They are currently 0-7. I guess, Sal, is it possible they go over?
I mean, I guess it's possible, but I don't think so. I will say that they win at least one game.
Steve,
they're not terrible. They haven't been terrible.
Yeah, they haven't been terrible. They will win a game.
They're
I don't know when.
77
I don't know how.
Point differential. Minus 77. How is that not terrible?
Well, you divide that by 7 games, and it's 11 points.
So they're losing by double digits every week, is what you just said.
But they've been blown out in a game or two, I guess, right? Maybe even a third game. But there's been other games that we've watched where they've been competitive, and they've been in the game in the fourth quarter, and games where they looked like they could have pulled it out, and they lost late. So I don't think that they are the Detroit Lions, the 0-16 Detroit Lions team, and some of these other the 1-15 Jet team from back in the Richie Kotite days. Those are bad, awful teams. There's some talent on this team, and I imagine they're going to pull at least one game out. I'd hate to be that team that they end up beating, but I think it's going to happen.
All right, so the Cleveland Browns are giving up the second most points to quarterbacks, the 5th most points to running backs, the 5th most points to wide receivers, and the 2nd most points to tight ends. So I guess I ask you this, Steve. Are you starting every Jet you can find?
Yeah, even Bilal Powell. Imagine that. No, but in most cases, I'm starting Matt Forte, especially after the week that he had last week. Brandon Marshall, he's an every week must start. I think Quincy Enunwa is going to have another good week. And then they don't really have a tight end, so you're not starting their tight end. But I wanted to ask you about your infatuation with Ryan Fitzpatrick this week, who gets the start and who you've got ranked 13th overall.
Yep.
And going against these Cleveland Browns, they are bad, but that is just a little surprising. That's got to be the highest you've had him ranked all year.
It'll be the highest I have him ranked all year to going forward too. It's literally just about this matchup and how bad the Cleveland Browns have been. I mean, they're second in QB points against for fantasy, but I don't even think that tells the story, because I think that they are just absolutely atrocious. They have intercepted 6 passes, so I guess there's that. But which is better than average around the league, I guess, or right around average around the league. So they're not terrible in that regard. But they have given up 18 touchdowns, which is tied for the league lead with the Detroit Lions, who you guys said were awful. And right. I don't think that there's any. I don't think they present any kind of issue. They can't rush the passer very well. And I think if you give Fitzpatrick enough time, he will eventually throw a horrible interception to ruin the game, but he will throw some touchdowns as well. and as we know in fantasy football, if you can throw enough touchdowns to offset some interceptions, the interceptions don't really matter as much because you're only losing 2 points.
That is very true. Very true. Fair enough. You can't argue that the Browns are bad and that starting people against them is usually a good idea.
And just to be clear, so you guys have him where we're at 20th and 21st. Sal, 20th for you. Steve, 21st for you. So obviously you guys are much further down, but you at least he's startable in 2 quarterback leagues for you guys. So that's an improvement.
That's right. There are 2 quarterbacks that are not startable in 2 quarterback leagues this week.
So for those of you who are so for those of you who are desperate for quarterbacks, which Sal finds himself in that position, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Josh McCown looks like he may be on track to start this game. He's been practicing. Cody Kessler is also close to being ready to start. He may be cleared on Friday. Which would be, most of you today as you're listening to this. So, Sal, aside from your struggles in our 16-team league, for most people, would you start either of these guys?
And for the record, I was looking around for Fitzpatrick, but somebody already owned them. Falafel. I couldn't believe it. And they're starting him this week, by the way. It's a desperation play. As bad as these defenses are, and the possibilities are there, but the possibilities are also there that this could be an absolute dud, So it's a desperation play. In a 2 QB league, I would start McCown. I don't think Kessler's going to be cleared to play personally, but I would start McCown in a 2 QB league if I had to. But in a standard, normal, regular fantasy football league, if you've gotten to that point, it's bad. It's bad. That means people in your league own too many quarterbacks.
So to Steve's point, if you are in a 2 quarterback league and you're starting either Jay Cutler or Cody Kessler for us on our ranks, you should look elsewhere. But other than that, you are fine.
That's right.
And if it's McCown starting instead of Kessler, it sounds like Sam Bradford might be the odd man out there. So, just to be clear there. So. All right, anything else from this game, guys? Corey Coleman's close to returning. He started practicing again, but it doesn't look like he's going to be in this game, so he's not relevant. But a guy, again, I want to mention, if he's available in your league, he's another guy you want to look to pick up now and see, before he gets going, because I do think he will have some value later on in the season.
I have one question for you, sir.
Yes?
Why do you not like Quincy Enunwa?
I am too far down on Quincy Enunwa this week. I will be the first one to admit that. My rankings certainly don't reflect the value that I think he will provide this week. I have no idea how I got him to 70. I think it was a typo.
Stop having baby falafel type up your rankings.
She's way more quicker on the keyboard than I am. So, all right, let's move along. The Oakland Raiders will travel to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers, Sal. So I'm going to start with you here. What do you think is going to happen in this game? Are the Raiders going to get back on track? Can they exploit the terrible Tampa Bay secondary and make that passing offense look great again?
Yeah, well, we're going to get revenge for the Super Bowl back in 2002. It took us a few years, but
are you going to beat the Patriots later too?
We're coming back. Well, we beat the Patriots. If you remember that year, we got robbed. But anyway, I digress. Listen. I think that you're gonna get David Carr going in this game. You're definitely gonna start Cooper and Michael Crabtree, who's as I pointed out the other day, is the number 6 overall wide receiver in fantasy football. It might come as a surprise to people. You're going to get those guys in there. I would even start Latavius Murray, and that would be about all I would go on that offense. I'm not starting any of the other 2 running backs right now. I'm not touching a tight end in this offense, but I don't see a reason why the Raiders won't come out this week and put up points. And I'm not saying they're going to win the game. I do think that they will win the game, but I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion that they should go into Tampa and beat them. But I think they'll definitely put points up on that defense for sure.
Yep, it's a game where you're starting everybody that you can. I've written down. You start both quarterbacks. You start running backs from each team, Latavius Murray and Jacquizz Rodgers, and there are 3 wide receivers, Evans, Cooper, and Crabtree. And then if you need a tight end fill-in for this week, Cameron Brate is a great fill-in, and that's it. And because there's going to be a ton of points scored in this game.
So what are you guys doing as far as the running game on the Tampa Bay side? Jacquizz Rodgers and does Peyton Barber have any value this week?
I don't think you could start him yet. I think he's worth an ad. He's worth having on a roster should something happen to Jacquizz, who's getting a ton of touches, or should they decide, after last week to divide the touches up a little bit more. I don't know that I'd be starting him anywhere this week. A guy in a deeper league that I would look to, maybe Russell Shepard. We spoke about him. He was my waiver wire ad. I did have him in my lineup as a flex until I heard that it sounds like Moncrief will be back, and I slipped Moncrief in there for him. But Raiders have been absolutely atrocious in defending wide receivers and the pass in general this year. So he's a guy that if you're, having to make a tough decision this week, as a guy I could definitely see you slipping into your lineup.
All right. And, of course, since we talked about how bad Hearns was, he just scored a touchdown. So just wanted to point that out for everyone.
Hopefully I'll see that in another minute or so. Thanks.
Sorry, I forget that your TV is behind in the times. All right, so basically, recap of the Oakland Raiders and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Start all your players. They're all pretty much going to have some value. So let's move along. The last of the 1 o'clock games, Seattle Seahawks will travel to New Orleans to take on the Saints. Now, obviously, the Saints are at home.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about that Allen Hurts touchdown now that I just seen it.
Oh, good.
Good.
I
think he was a better start. I think I was right where I had him this
week. So as I was saying, obviously the New Orleans Saints at home have been nothing less than spectacular offensively, but this is the Seattle defense that has pretty much limited everyone. So, Steve, I ask you, what are you doing with all your Saints? Are you full go with them, even though they're playing Seattle?
With Brandon Cooks, I'm a full go. I think you can start him every single week. With the other guys, I think it definitely depends on what you're working with. With Willie Snead, he hasn't really done a ton since he had that breakout week 1, and then Michael Thomas, he's been very solid. We've talked about him a lot recently. But the Seattle defense is a real defense, and they're very good. So if you have to start them in this week where there are a lot of teams on bye, I think you have to have some lowered expectations there. But I don't. Them being at home, how well they play at home, and so I know what it could be very intriguing, and it could make you should want to start them. But I don't know if they're absolutely going to be startable all the way around. And on the Seattle side of the ball, you got Russell Wilson going up against this terrible defense, but he has looked terrible himself all the way around. So, Kev, what do you do with a guy like Russell Wilson? And it's someone who's popped up today on the injury report with something else, a new ailment today.
Yeah, what did he pop up with today? He's already dealing with a foot or an ankle injury. I think he has a knee injury that he's working through. What popped up today that I didn't see the actual. I saw that he was on the injury report for something new, but
today was a pectoral injury.
A pectoral injury. So look, here's the deal. I think if he's out there, unless for some reason he doesn't start, which it seems like he's going to start. Despite these multiple injuries, I think you're putting him out there because, I think where you drafted him and where he, other options in particular this week, I think you have to, and particularly going against the New Orleans defense. You can't pass up a kind of matchup that way, and you have to hope that he gets right, and maybe this is the type of game where you can see him get right. You're talking about a New Orleans defense that's giving up over 22 points a game to quarterbacks, so it's a great matchup. It's in a dome, and I think they should be able to pass on this team. So I'm starting him. I think I have him at number 6 overall. Is that correct? 4 overall. You guys have him at both. You guys both have him at 6. So sounds like we're all starting him, and I'm certainly getting him in there.
How you guys feeling about Jimmy Graham going back to New Orleans this week? You think that there's a possibility he has a huge game?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
I do.
Excellent. Thank you for the analysis.
I do think he's going to have a great game, but I don't know necessarily it's because of the going back to New Orleans. I guess it's entire. Obviously we just talked about how, what the Patriots like to do, but I think that they're a special team when it comes to that kind of thing, whereas they really like to get the revenge game in. But with Seattle, I think the offense is including him a ton as it is, and then you add on the fact that it's New Orleans, who's middle of the pack against tight ends, but just a team that can be had through the air. So I think it's a great matchup for him. And
how about this idea here? Christine Michael comes in. He goes against the worst run defense against running backs in fantasy football. I expect him to have a huge day. Would you sell high on him after this week?
Yes.
You think that makes sense?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. I would be. I've talked about that several times in the Fantasy Life app Falafel House chat, where people have asked about Michael, and I've said it. I would wait out until after this week, and then I would sell because I think Rawls will be coming back shortly, and I don't know that. I think that everyone thinks that Michael has this job locked up. I don't necessarily think so. I think you're going to see Rawls start to mix in. I don't know how much, but I think you're going to see him mix in. And then I also think, as I mentioned, I think earlier this week, CJ Prosise came back and had a couple of catches this past week, and he's going to be more involved in the passing game. They let go of CJ Spiller. I think they're going to look to get Prosise more involved, so he's going to eat touches away from Michael as well. Christian Michael's value is going to drop the rest of the season. That is a fact. I don't know how much, but it will drop in it. And if he has a big game against New Orleans, which he should, given the matchup, I think you absolutely have to try, see what you can get for him.
Do you think that they cut Spiller because too many CJs catching the ball on one team is a bad idea?
Yeah, I think the league has a rule against the number of CJ receptions.
So just 2 things real quick. Someone had written in the Fantasy Life app today, does Thomas Rawls coming back next week mean you automatically have to start him? No. Enter Jamal Charles, right? You got to let these guys come back in and get acclimated. Don't just plug in a former big name or star or a guy who's accomplished something in this league just because he's back. There's certain guys who, they've rested properly, they've trained properly, you've seen them. I would not be putting Rawls in any of my lineups next week. And to go back to the Jet game, we spoke earlier, and we said this on the last podcast, and even Steve, who has a man crush on him, agreed. Matt Forte has a great matchup with Cleveland this week. If he has another huge game coming off of last week, I would move him as well. He's another sell-high candidate, especially coming off of a big game against Cleveland this week.
All right, let's continue on through the games. We're into the 4 o'clock games now. The San Diego Chargers will travel to Denver to take on Steve's Denver Broncos. Steve, what do you got in this game? What are you looking at? What are you highlighting here?
Well, definitely with all the news coming out about CJ Anderson, it's looking at Devontae Booker and him taking over the lead running back role and getting the lion's share of the work, even though he took that job over last week. But now it is officially his job with CJ Anderson. I believe came out with a torn meniscus, so he's going to be out for the foreseeable future. Um, we've all got him ranked relatively high. He instantly comes in as running back 12 for us. I'm highest on him at 11, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. I've loved watching him run. He looks really shifty, but when he gets going, he's not afraid of contact. He will lower his shoulder, and he will run into defenders and try and pick up a few extra yards. So I really like him, and I'm excited to see what he can do coming back. I think that Denver's going to be, all over San Diego in this game, having lost to them just a few weeks ago. In San Diego, they're going to want to get some revenge going. And so on Denver's side of the ball, you're starting Devontae Booker, you're starting Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas. And then for San Diego, that's the one where you really have to think of. You're going to start Melvin Gordon because of his touchdown production. That is going to continue, at least he's going to get the opportunity. He is their goal line back. And then with everybody else, you kind of have to pick and choose how your roster is made up, what other options that you have. Travis Benjamin and Tyrell Williams, you just expect them to have some lower production games, which means Phillip Rivers probably is having some lower games. Then you've got the two tight ends that you have to deal with too. So I don't think any of the wide receivers are necessarily really startable. But we got both of the tight ends are fairly decent options, except for Hunter Henry lower dealing with the concussion stuff. And then we're pretty low on Antonio Gates actually as well. So it'll probably be a tough afternoon for San Diego's offense. I'm not looking forward to starting much there other than Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's a great point, and it's something that I like to bring up because we get so many questions from people talking about the matchup against the Denver Broncos and referring to running backs. And I think a lot of people see that, they understand that the Denver Broncos have a great defense, and they just immediately think, oh, I can't start my running backs. Look, you can run on Denver. They're 14th highest fantasy points against for running backs, 18.9 points for running backs against them this year on average per game. So you can run on the Denver Broncos. It's basically the only thing you can do against the Denver Broncos. So San Diego is going to have to use Melvin Gordon. They're going to have to run the ball, and I think to Steve's point, you're hoping that he continues to get in the end zone. So just something I like to point out because we get a ton of those questions. Oh, he's playing Denver. We can't start him. If it's a running back, you can, and you have to look at that, and you have to look at how they are against specific positions.
And the only thing I was going to add was Hunter Henry was removed from the injury report today. So he would obviously go up our boards based on that. We all had him kind of lower than where he's been. He would definitely leap up for me.
Agreed.
Knowing that he's cleared. And since I have nothing else to add to this game, I would just like to say that when Matt Castle gets into the game against you and no one's been injured, you've gotten your ass kicked. Jacksonville, you're terrible, Jacksonville.
Don't blame the entire team.
No, I'm blaming every one of them.
Okay, fair enough.
All right? It's a group effort that you guys suck. You have grouply sucked.
Who do you think finishes worse, Jacksonville or Cleveland?
Oh, my God. It's just so much damn talent on this Jacksonville team to be this bad. It's so awful. There's no way that this guy, if he even finishes the year out, Bradley, that he comes back as a coach next year. I'm going to say that Jacksonville will finish with more wins, but not by a whole hell of a lot.
Steve?
Only because they got a 2 spot on him.
Yeah. I mean,
From here on out, it might be Cleveland.
Who would you take? Would you take Bortles or Kessler?
I would take Kevin Hogan.
Hogan. All right. Okay. All right.
Hogan.
So 4:25, the Green Bay Packers will travel to Atlanta to play the Atlanta Falcons. This should be an interesting game. It's one I'm actually looking forward to. I think it should be a fun one to watch. Obviously the Falcons. I don't know how to read them. Obviously, their offense is off the charts. They're number 1 in yards, number 1 in points and all that. They have a plus 30 point differential, but they're 4-3. So, and they've given up 199 points this season. So in 7 games. So they're a tough one to read, and you just at home you got to like them against the Broncos, who haven't looked good. But this is an interesting matchup for running back, Sal, because you have obviously Tevin Coleman's injured. He may not, doesn't seem like he's going to play in this game. So you would think that just boosts the value for Devonta Freeman. But Green Bay has been very good against the running back. So what do you think is going to go on with Devonta Freeman this game?
Yeah, Devonta Freeman they'll use him in the passing game and get him out, outside a little bit more the way that they do. I think that I don't want to say he's matchup proof, but even against good run defenses, they find ways to work the running backs in, even if they wait to do checkdowns. They look downfield for Julio or one of these tight ends breaking up the field, and they just check down to Devonta Freeman. He's quick and shifty, and I'm starting Devonta Freeman as we did our little mid-season fantasy draft the other day, and I took him with my fourth pick. I think that he absolutely will have a solid enough game to give you RB1 numbers, low-end RB1 numbers.
All right, so Steve, what are you? Obviously you're starting the Julio if you have him. You're starting, and on the other side of the ball, are you starting Jordy Nelson? We've seen some really poor play out of Jordy lately. It looks like he's having some trouble getting separation. Are you concerned?
I'm not concerned, mainly because he's been such a highly productive red zone target for Aaron Rodgers. He's scoring those touchdowns, which is taken him. You don't notice his somewhat low yardage total because those touchdowns are making up for it. But when he doesn't get into the end zone like he did last week, that's when it really starts to show. I'm starting him this week, even though I do expect him to have a pretty tough matchup. If you've been watching the games against the Falcons, you notice that their top cornerback, Desmond Trufant, he typically shadows the number one wide receiver on the other team, and he has done a really decent job this year. And he's done really well shutting those guys down. But, I don't think when Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball to you, you've always got a chance. So I'm rolling him out there. I'm rolling Randall Cobb out there. But who I'm most excited about this week for the Packers is definitely Ty Montgomery. I'm on that hype train pretty good. I just think that the offense looked completely different with him in there instead of Eddie Lacy. It just gave them a completely different dynamic. So I'm really excited with him. I've got him going in quite a few lineups this week. I'm really excited for this game.
Are you excited for this game?
No. Not at all. I am excited for this one. I do. It's going to be a good one.
And sad news, the Packers had an injury settlement and waived Jared Abbrederis today.
Yeah, that is sad. Only because I have him.
I'm broken up.
I have him in a dynasty league somewhere. So
I have him in two dynasty leagues.
I was hopeful he might turn it around at some point, but sounds like he will not. So, all right. So let's keep moving. We have 2 games left to go. Philadelphia Eagles will play the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. This is definitely another game that I'm interested in seeing how this goes, because this definitely does have implications for the division. Obviously, the Cowboys are leading the way at 5-1. The Eagles are right behind them at 4-2. So this is for first place in the division. Sal, Carson Wentz looked like a guy that was at least serviceable for fantasy purposes earlier on in the season, had a couple of tough matchups, and has since looked a little bit more like a rookie, but did salvage a game against Minnesota where most quarterbacks don't. So my question to you is on a week where there's a lot of bye weeks, and, if you're playing in a 2-quarterback league or you're desperate for a quarterback, can you trust Carson Wentz to get you some points? Asking for a friend here.
Well, tell your friend that he should draft better. Listen,
in his defense, he drafted Tom Brady and Carson, and Roethlisberger, and that,
This smells like a Scott Fishbowl question.
It may be.
It smells very Scott Fishy.
It's very Scott Fishy.
Yeah, listen, a 2 QB league, especially like Steve pointed out before, there's 26 quarterbacks playing this week. So in a 2 QB league or a super flex league, you're going to put Wentz in there, and he'll probably have a serviceable day at, but I'm going to say like a 13, 14-point day. So nothing that's going to knock you out of the park, but something that's quality out of a super flex position. But yeah, I think that he's a rookie, and while he seems to be a good rookie and possibly one of the better ones out of the class, Dak Prescott in the same game has actually looks better than him, in my opinion, overall. You can't trust him as your number one guy. You can't trust him on a weekly basis. So Superflex 2 QB only. But, yeah, you put him in this week. You'll be okay. Let your friend know. It's okay, little buddy.
Thanks, pal. I did get a lot of points out of Kendall Wright tonight, so that was helpful. So, all right. So Carson Wentz is a guy you may be able to get.
Were you rubbing that in on me because somebody started him against me somewhere too?
No, I'm not. I actually I thought I was gonna have a bad Scott Fishbowl week, and luckily Kendall Wright has started it off okay, so I'm happy about it. Steve, the biggest debate I think with the Dallas Cowboys right now is that you see Tony Romo starting to do very limited things in practice. Dak Prescott's been pretty serviceable, not only from a regular, obviously from a regular NFL standpoint, but from a fantasy standpoint, he's been a decent enough quarterback. Which do you think helps the Dallas offense from a fantasy standpoint going forward?
I think that depends on which position you're talking about. I think if you're talking from wide receiver position, from Dez Bryant's standpoint specifically, I think people would probably prefer Tony Romo coming back. But from an Ezekiel Elliott standpoint, I think you'd probably rather have Dak Prescott in there because you'd think that the offense might be a little bit more or run-oriented. Although with that offensive line, they are going to run the ball a lot regardless. You just know that the chemistry that Tony Romo has with Dez Bryant didn't exactly seem to be there with Dak Prescott, obviously since he is a rookie. But with Dez Bryant coming back this week, that's what I'm most excited to see what happens. He's, chirping quite a bit right now. And that, when he's doing that is usually when you can tell he's feeling his best and he's doing the most. So I'm excited to see what he looks like on the field. He is going up against a pretty tough defense. Philly ranks 7th against pass catchers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I'm looking forward to this game as well. There's not a ton of games on the schedule, but there are quite a few good games.
That is true. I do think that it's interesting. We've talked about it before that with Dak Prescott and Dez Bryant, we've talked about the fact that Dez Bryant goes up and gets the ball a lot, and you've heard so much about how Dak Prescott doesn't make bad throws. So a guy like Dez, who's covered but can still make the grab, we're going to see if whether or not Dak can start taking advantage of that. So I am interested to see that. Sal, any other thoughts on this game before we move along?
Nothing really to add other than they kind of hinted at today that Dak Prescott will start next week as well, week 9, and they're going to bring Romo back a little bit slowly. So I think that they're trying to make the point that they like to keep Dak in there, but they're trying not to hurt anybody's feelings. So it'll be very interesting to see how this is going forward.
One final thing I think will be interesting in this game is when Steve is forced to start Wendell Smallwood in Falafel. That should be fun.
That will be interesting.
There was something that came out today that they think that maybe Ryan Matthews is not up to finishing games and that he needs to come let them know how he's feeling in the third quarter, and they might actually bring Wendell Smallwood in to finish games, almost like a reliever role type of deal. So that's not, based on a 16-team league and not having a lot of options, he may get something out of that.
Well, there you go. All right, Monday night, the Minnesota Vikings travel to Chicago to take on the Bears. I expect this one to be not good for the Bears. I don't think that. I think it's pretty clear. The Minnesota defense is for real. Obviously, they had some struggles against Philadelphia, but aside from that particular game, it's just been so dominating. And you're talking about a Chicago Bears team who is welcoming back Jay Cutler to the fold. So I see lots of interceptions here. But Steve, we've talked about him many, many times on this podcast. Does Jay Cutler make Alshon Jeffrey a little bit more relevant? Or are you going to allow Sal to squash our dreams with stats about Cameron Meredith targets?
I will.
Tissue issue.
You listen. You're going to have to sing that about other people because he has broken that curse all up until I just said that.
Yeah, what is wrong with you?
Listen, Alshon Jeffrey is going to be better with Jay Cutler. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until week 10 to see it because they're playing Minnesota this week and they're on a bye week in week 9. So we're not going to get to see very much of that. I'm not assuming. I agree. I think that the Vikings are going to come out and they're going to be pretty upset about taking that loss last week. This is a division game. Jay Cutler coming back. The defense is going to go crazy. I'm not starting any of my Bears except for maybe Zach Miller. I don't like Jordan Howard this week.
Langford, would you have started Derrick Henry over him?
Absolutely, no question.
I mean, on Steve's roster, Derrick Henry's an automatic start.
Yeah, exactly. Jeremy Langford practicing again this week. If he is able to go, I'm not taking that kind of chance. I'm starting Alshon Jeffrey if he's a bye week fill in 12-team leagues this week. And Cameron Meredith, I'm probably not starting at all. And for Minnesota, I'm probably not starting anyone other than Matt Asiata with Jerick McKinnon in a walking boot on Thursday. It doesn't look like he's going to end up playing this weekend, so Matt Asiata should have a pretty solid day against the Bears' pretty awful rush defense.
So I'm going to step in and defend, Kev, before you go. I'm going to defend the Bears because the Bears are the number 1 ranked run defense against running backs in the last 4 weeks in the NFL. They're giving up 8.55 points a game the last 4 weeks.
Wow, so, you should have started Howard or Henry over Howard.
What the hell does that have to do? It's the Bears defense.
Oh yeah,
Howard's not going against his own team. Damn it.
That's true.
But somebody brought that up earlier in the falafel chat, and I brought that stat up. The Bears have actually been okay on defense and much better at home.
True.
I think this is actually going to be a close game. I think Minnesota could pull it out late, but I think the Bears are going to be in this game to the shock of most people, including Bears fans.
I don't know. You have to score to be in a game, and I just don't see them scoring too much.
Right. I think it'll be 2 defenses holding each other up.
Wow, this is very awkward now. All right, so real quick, Alshon Jeffrey or Dante Moncrief, Steve?
It would be Alshon Jeffrey.
Okay. Sal, who do you got in those two?
I have Jeffrey ranked higher.
All right, good. We can check out all those rankings on falafelhouse.com, which is a great place to see all of our stuff, daily articles, and many, many more items. And for now, that about wraps up the show, I think. So, Steve, why don't you get to your final thought?
Hey, I will do that. You know, this Thursday night game's over, and you know what happened?
The Titans won?
Blake Bortles garbage timed all over my face. He did it. He did it. He ended up, he finished this game with 29.7 fantasy points, only his best outing of the entire year. And who would have thunk it? That was going up against me in Falafel. I am already down by 39 points heading into the weekend. This is going to be a good one. So if you'd like to cheer me up, you can find me in the Falafel House chat on the Fantasy Life app. You can find us on Twitter at Falafel House. Go like our page on Facebook. You can find that Falafel House there. Falafelhouse.com. Search for it on the internet. You're going to find us somewhere. Sal.
Well, I can only say it's probably a big improvement on that face. Whatever was done to it definitely helped.
I'm not even going to laugh at that.
Wow,
it was funny, though.
Again,
it was funny. I'm just not going to laugh, though.
And every week I feel just like I don't prepare myself as well as Steve does because he just says so many good things, and I have no good final thing to say other than I love you, good people of Falafel, and I give you Kevin Cotillo.
Yeah, I always feel less prepared than Steve as well, which is why I usually go with my rant about trying to get some reviews on iTunes. So if you have liked the show, or even if you haven't, you could still leave us a good review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from, because we definitely would appreciate those. They help us out quite a bit. And we will be back with you on Monday night for us, Tuesday morning for most of you. And until then, Steve, hit the button.